This video is going to cover the integumentary system. It's going to be more of a review. It's not going to be very long. This section is very short as far as how we cover it, and most of the information is verbatim in this outline and also this PowerPoint. So when you study skin, you have to remember it's called the first line of defense. It is a perfect barrier. The top layers of skin are dead. If you remember from histology, skin is the epidermis. The top layer is keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. The top layers of keratinized stratified squamous are dead. They get sloughed off every day. And the layers at the very bottom, which we'll get to in a second, there are actually layers of the epidermis. That's the active mitosis layer, and it's adding on the layers that are from beneath. They're replacing the layers that are sloughed off every day. So it's a very, very good barrier against microorganisms. So here are some functions of skin. Prevent excessive loss of moisture. Yes, skin is waterproof as well. Keeps water from rushing in the body. Protection against mechanical injury, bumping into things, entrance of microbes, kind of touched on that. And then part of the complex temperature regulating system, right, the dermis layer, which has all the accessory organs. Skin is two layers, the dermis and the epidermis. The dermis layer has sweat glands, and there's two kinds. But they actually, sweat is the fastest way to remove heat from the body. And plus, skin does regulate how much heat is being regulated to the outside. Vessels to the skin will dilate when the temperature is warm, allowing more body heat to escape, that kind of thing. It is a major sensory organ for pain, the things that you touch, temperature, anything like that. Skin has receptors in the dermal layer that allow a person to know when it's cold, hot, what they're touching, that kind of thing. And vitamin D is stored in skin. It's actually something called cholecalciferol. It's absorbed from the diet. And once you get out in the sun converts what that stored premature part of vitamin D, converts it to vitamin D. UV does. And it helps your mood as well. Okay, so the layers, epidermis and dermis. Now I'm going to bounce back and forth because I do have a picture of our skin model that we use in lab, and it's actually really good. I can actually, well, we'll leave it the other way. But I'll be bouncing back and forth from this. I'll make that a little bit bigger. So right here, now the epidermis is this top layer. And I'm not sure if it'll help if I make this full screen or not. So up here would be what's called the epidermis. In fact, that layer right here, this is a thick part of skin. That looks like the stratum lucidum. And then all this down in here is the dermis layer. And the part called the subcutaneous, which has the bigger vessels and adipose, that's not part of skin. Skin is the dermis and the epidermis. This is probably a better picture. So look, you can see this is just the top layer, and where it comes down. Now these areas that are coming up, that's called the dermal papillae or papilla. And you see how it comes around like that, and then you have this top layer, the epidermis, and then all of this in here is the dermis. And then this bottom part with all the adipose, and like I said, the big vessels here, the arteries and the veins, that is all the subcutaneous or hypodermis, which is not part of skin. But we'll go through this fairly quickly. And I didn't mean it. Well, while I have this up, this represents different areas of the body. I didn't write these down. I think this over here was something like armpit, scalp, body. This represents the foot or hands. See how thick that is? And this is just a layer that has the epidermis taken off. All right, let me go back. All right, so epidermis, top layers. Like I said, it's keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. This underneath is called the dermis. It has all the accessory organs. It has a connective tissue type called irregular dense connective tissue. So it's very flexible. Remember, dense regular was part of ligaments and tendons, and it's really going one direction and doesn't really handle stress from opposite directions, whereas this does. And the subcutaneous layer, large blood vessels, adipose, I showed you that. So, and like I said, this is written in verbatim. These are the layers of the epidermis. You have to know these in the correct order. The stratum corneum would be the top layer. Stratum lucidum, and the important part of this, it's only found in the palms of the hands and soles of the feet, only where the epidermis is very thick. The stratum granulosum is the layer that's underneath this, and the cells start to flatten out. And these bottom two layers, the cells are more round. They start to flatten out in this area. And the stratum spinosum is where the cells are starting to accumulate keratin. That's what makes it keratinized. And keratin actually kills the cell. And what's important about the bottom layer, this is the very bottom layer, and this would be the top layer that is dead. I was telling you about that. This is the layer that's undergoing mitosis. It's called the stratum basale. And that's also where you have what are called melanocytes, pigment-producing cells, right there. I don't know why that's not bolded, but that's a melanocyte. And they produce melanin, a dark pigment. And the darker skin, the more melanin. And that depends on DNA and genetics. But if you're lighter skinned and you go out in the sun, your skin will darken because melanin absorbs UV light. And if you're lighter skinned, well, any skin color, but if you're lighter skinned, you can notice it more. The tan, the darkening that sometimes people get in summer if they're outside a lot, is the increased amount of melanin to absorb UV. And melanocytes are the pigment-producing cells. So let's see. There's here are the 5 layers. Now it looks like it's broken down. I apologize for how small this writing is. At least this is not in a big classroom. But here's the stratum corneum. That white layer represents the stratum lucidum. Now, it's called a clear layer. It's only found in the palms of the hands, like it says here, soles of the feet. Stratum granulosum, you can see that there. The cells are flattening out. You see how round these are. This is the stratum spinosum, and that very bottom layer, and I'm talking about that little small layer, is the stratum basale. And you can kind of see it there. This looks like it's not as pigmented, but you can actually see the stratum lucidum on that part there. Well, I guess it would be there. And then here, it looks like that's the stratum granulosum, excuse me. To go in order, this is Can Lucy Grab Some Books? All right, that's the C, the L, the G, the S, and the P, and those should be capitalized, but oh well. This is a melanocyte in the bottom called the stratum basale, and you can see it has little extensions that go out all over the place. The brown granules are melanin. Okay, now to the accessory organs: hair follicle, erector pili muscle, nails, and then we'll get to the glands. Now, nails, well, we'll just cover these in order. I'm going to bounce back and forth between the model and these pictures. So here's hair. Now, actually, what would be better? Let me go to this one. So this is a hair follicle. So it goes all the way down. It's got that little bitty artery and vein that come up here. This is actually a papilla as well. This is called the root. The part that sticks up is the shaft. And hair is actually dead keratinized cells. In the bottom here, they're still alive, but as a hair grows in length, it gets away from this little artery down here, away from the nourishment, so it dies. So hair is dead keratinized cells, and the part that sticks up above, like I said, is called the hair shaft. This is an erector pili muscle here. That's what causes goosebumps. It responds to a decrease in temperature, and it pulls on the bottom of these hair follicles and makes them stand on end. And the whole purpose would be if the hairs are standing up, it traps heat near the body. Doesn't really work with human beings because we don't have very much hair anymore, but it works with animals. And it also gets triggered with the central nervous system response of being nervous or scared or mad. You see a dog's back when a dog sees another dog, their hair stands up on their ends. These little yellow things are pressure receptors in skin. These are deep ones. These up here are called Meissners. They're more for light touch. All right, I showed you the hair follicle, the erector pili muscle, nails. That's kind of an interesting. I actually lost a nail one time. I was high school football gladiator. But yeah, here's a nail, and this part down here, which is called the active layer, is the lunula. It's undergoing mitosis, and it's adding on to this part called the nail plate, and the nail bed is beneath that. Nails are also dead keratinized cells, and if you've ever lost a nail, I actually did lose my pinky nail once. The skin underneath that's very sensitive, and I guess if a person went without nails, that skin would eventually toughen up and it wouldn't hurt. But anyway, those are nails. Now, it had mentioned something about glands. Now, while I'm at it, so on our model, here's the hair shafts, and then see there's a hair follicle. Here's the whole follicle. Here's that little papilla I was telling you about. It's even showing, looks like the little artery that comes up. So all this is a hair follicle. It's actually got a hair root on the inside, and then and the root's below skin, of course. And then that's the hair shaft part. And then here are some erector pili muscles there. All right, so going on to glands. Now, there are 3 kinds of glands that you find in skin. These are all in the dermal layer. Now, this is showing a sebaceous gland, and I can actually make this a little bigger. I might just stay on this page. Here is a sebaceous gland. It's basically associated with each hair follicle, and you can see how it comes down here and kind of encapsulates the whole thing. They produce something called sebum, and sebum is a fatty material. It's an oil that helps waterproof skin, and it makes these little hair shafts pliable. And basically, they do respond to hormones and stress. During puberty, these can become overactive. They'll get blocked, and then they get infected, and that's what acne is. That's what a pimple is. So acne is actually overproduction of sebum, which is the material these glands produce. And there's the sebum part. It makes the skin waterproof. Okay. Sweat glands, and I'll show you on our model. So apocrine sweat glands, now these are interesting because they're not active till puberty. So a couple of things, they are attached to hair follicles, but they're only found in the genital areas and the axillary areas. And all sweat glands respond to body temperature. Now a person that's nervous, they're going to sweat more, and of course these glands would be activated. But these actually are called scent producing. They have body odor attached to them. The microbes on skin will metabolize the contents of an apocrine sweat gland. You can see it there. This is called a duct, D-U-C-T. It goes up and it leads to the top of the skin. And when these are being active and they're excreting sweat up here, the bacteria on skin will metabolize that, and that produces body odor. And that's also why kids do not really require deodorant necessarily until they get to be in their teenage years, because these are not even active till puberty. Eccrine sweat glands, now these are found everywhere else. So forehead, upper neck, chest, back, palms. They're not supposed to be scent producing, and they are active from the time a person is born. So kids actually have less active sweat glands when they're young compared to when they're older, because the apocrine are not even active yet. They're not attached to hair follicles, and they're not thought to be scent producing. So that's these over here. These are eccrine sweat glands. So if we bounce over to our model, see these white glands there that are coming up? Now that looks like that's attached, but these are all eccrine. And then this thing here looks a lot different. It's coming up. That's an apocrine sweat gland. And like I said, these are little pressure receptors. But and these are on any of ours. So there's the sebaceous glands. There's a sweat gland there. There's the picture I've been showing you. So here's the apocrine. See the duct comes up and it empties in where the hair follicle is. Here's the eccrine sweat gland. All right, so, and those are active from the time a person is born, essentially. I mean, babies can sweat. Temperature regulation, I'm going to stay on this page. A couple of things that happen, and this is a great picture. I got this out of another textbook. This is showing with an increase in body temperature, there's more blood flow to the skin surface. So here's the epidermis. It does not have a direct blood supply. All the blood supply comes from underneath. But see the big yellow arrows? If a person's hot, you have more blood flow to the skin surface and more heat is leaving the body. That's why, once again, if you're lighter skinned, a person's face might look red. You know, kids' faces get red. There's more blood flow to the skin surface. If there's a decrease in temperature, you can see here now these are little, they're called capillary sphincters. Get to that in the heart portion. There's less blood flow to the skin surface. It's not shut off because it's got to stay alive, but you can see the arrows are smaller, and this would be a colder environment. You're going to lose less heat to the outside. So that's, and the other way that skin, as far as an increase goes, is sweating. Big thing. Increased production of sweat, it carries the most heat through sweating, but this is another mechanism with controlling how much blood is going to the skin surface. And that's what this is talking about. A decrease in body temp looks like that. You'd have less blood flow to the skin surface, less heat radiating to the outside. Of course, your body starts shivering. That's really not skin. Those are involuntary contraction of muscle groups, but that's just what happens when body temp drops. All right, the last part of this, just one real quick thing on here. As far as wound healing goes, there's a cell type called a fibroblast that we talked about with histology. They produce new connective tissue fibers, and they're responsible for forming scar tissue. And this is a great, now there's a couple, that's a great picture. I'm going to blow this up in our PowerPoint. See, here's a warm environment. Here's a colder environment. See, the core is still red, but everything else has a little lower temperature. I don't know why that was blank, but here is a, okay, so look, this is an injury. See the chunk of skin that's gone? You get a blood clot that forms. We'll talk about that later in the second half of anatomy. And then you get this scab, and it's showing here, and I'm sorry the writing's so small, but fibroblasts will come in and actually repair that damaged area. So they're responsible for repairing damaged tissues. Last thing, burns. A superficial partial thickness burn only involves the epidermis. It's actually called a first-degree burn. Be good to know there. And I want to say this is in your PowerPoint, I believe it is. There's a first degree. If you go back, a deep partial thickness burn involves the epidermis and part of the dermis. That's called a second degree. Those have some swelling. These, of course, hurt. First degrees hurt as well. A first degree burn might be you just grabbing something that's too hot and it makes your skin, and that also can cause some swelling of skin. But a second degree, you can see that there. And then a third degree burn is called a full thickness burn. And those, of course, none of them are great, but that one's the bad one. Here's the skin model. You see only the epidermis for the first degree. Here, epidermis, part of the dermis for a second degree. And then look, a third degree, it takes off all the way down, even the hypodermis, subcutaneous layer, which is really bad. And that's a third degree burn. So if that's over a huge percentage of the body, a person usually does not. It can be fatal. Massive infection. The top layers grow back first. They're faster. So wounds like that have to be debrided. The top layers have to be scraped off so the bottom layers can heal up. So anyway, it's just something we talk about with skin. So, there's that picture right there, even bigger. So there's a third degree burn. All right, I told you this is short. We got an extra page, but that's a real nice review of the integumentary system.